Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, as well as the latest episode of Legion. Like always, if you want to talk about something that you want to listen to, you can also look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of The Flash, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Legion. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of The Flash. A very good episode. It's very interesting getting them to join forces with, Amunet, which I'm just so happy to have Katie Sackhoff back on. I love that she's doing like her natural accent, like, oh, I'm kind of going undercover trying to be all American. It's kind of interesting to learn that her real name's like Leslie Jacoy, and she was like a flight attendant and everything. I completely forgot about till did she mention that in show, or was that something outside of the show that she mentioned the whole being a flight attendant? Either way. I love the whole her being like, she's like, oh look, this is where you keep your costume and everything. Almost like, oh, that's so cute. And so I was like, oh, why are you also wearing that mask? She's like, what do you mean? This is me to protect my identity. She's like, you don't. I mean, that's kind of stupid because I already know who you are. I know you're the same boy that I tried to get from Warden Wolf. You know, the same speedster. She's like, I recognize the jawline and everything. And he's just kind of like, well, shit. There's no point in keeping this on until he takes it off. And she's like, oh, look at you. Even the point when they were gathering evidence about her missing stuff that obviously Norvok ended up stealing. I love her being like, wow, David Cruz has got nothing on you. He's like, you almost see Barry getting flattered. He's like, oh, thanks. I guess because no one really compliments him on his like forensic work, and just having that, he's like, oh, it's interesting. It's always, I love that when I think this is the only show that really happens a lot. I'm sure it happens a little bit here and there in the other shows, but I feel like it's most prominent in this one where they work with villains, because a lot of times they work with a lot of reformed villains. So I mean, what I like about Amunet is she's kind of a bad guy, but she's one of those bad guys that easily tilts both ways. She's very much like Snart in that sense, because obviously she didn't have to tell Caitlin what she told her about the whole splicer actually not being a thing, which is also interesting. I love that kind of, like, I love that aspect about Caitlin too, is because she's so desperate to get Frost back, she didn't tell the team. Like, Joe's kind of saw through it because, like, I told you to go from a different perspective, but because he saw with me, it's like, you're actually using this Amunet situation because you think she might be able to help the Frost thing, but like, Caitlin was like, no, she could help with the satellites too, but I thought she could also help with the Frost thing as well, so. Because her biggest concern was, like, if she told the team that was the real reason why she wanted to track down Amunet, she figured they probably would. I mean, because Iris was basically telling her not to kind of go as dangerous with things as she has been, but her need, because like I said, it's just like her need to feel whole again is gone, you know? I mean, her need to feel whole again is what drives her, and that desperation to feel complete again. Oh, I was afraid. Luckily, it hasn't turned anything too bad. I mean, there's the whole thing beforehand where she was kind of like putting herself in danger, trying to get her adrenaline spiking so that it'd kick in Amunet. So there's that. I mean, not Amunet, but Frost. I'm mixing up names here. I do apologize. But it turns out that whole splasher thing was just a placebo. But it's interesting that Amunet would actually tell her. I mean, that shows that she is kind of a good person, because she could have just held that over Caitlin's head. It's like, oh, the moment we get the splicer back, because Caitlin also promised, like, okay, me and Frost will actually do one thing for you, whatever you ask of us. And it's like, she could have, still gotten a payout for that, but she did, because she saw how torn up, like, Caitlin was about it. Because at the same time, that's why she helped Caitlin before, because it's like, well, I see that you are so torn up. So even in the beginning, like, obviously she knew she probably could get something out of it, but in the long run, she also wanted to help Caitlin before and now. So, but it's just, she thought the splicer would work, which it would, but I guess just in Caitlin's situation, it doesn't work the way it should. So it gave her a placebo effect. So because she thought it gave her more control over Killer Frost, it inadvertently did, was all in her head. So I thought that was kind of neat. Also, like, has she always had that large staff? I mean, she's never really carried, I guess it's hard to carry that all around, or maybe she's never felt the need to carry it all around. Or maybe it was like a recent acquisition, like all those shards she ended up getting, because she usually just carries around that bucket. I also love her making her exit like that, like in a little tornado of them. I was like, that's pretty sweet. Poor Norvok too ended up getting his eye thing cut out. Which, is that a metahuman thing, or is that like has that ever been explained what that whole eye thing is? I mean, whatever it is, it's gone. Not unless that thing can grow back. I'd assume it can't. So there goes all his power sim. Which was also another thing too. The fact is that Barry ended up getting poisoned. Like, he's done that before, right? Phase through poison? I feel like the last time he got poisoned, did he phase through it? I don't remember. I feel like maybe he did. Or is this? I didn't know like he could do that. Like I guess it makes sense because it's in your system and stuff like that. And I guess if you vibrate at the right frequency, it just you can like vibrate it into a different frequency on its own because it came out of him. So I guess you can step. I mean, I guess it's the same principle as like him vibrating through a wall and stuff like that. But it's just kind of interesting to think that he could actually do that to a poison. Like I said, is this the first time he's ever done that or what? Kind of interesting. I was like, oh, it's got to be some. Oh, how is he going to get fixed? It's like face do it. I was like, that's interesting. That's just kind of caught my attention. I don't know. Hopefully, we might see more Emunet in the future. I mean, granted, she'll probably most likely be a bad guy because for her, the whole good guy thing probably isn't just doesn't pay a lot. So kind of along those same lines, I also really like the Caitlyn and Joe combo too, when like she froze the top and he just shot it. I mean, once again, looking at things from a different perspective, I really appreciated that. It's kind of interesting because the whole Caitlyn being desperate to get Frost back is very similar because at the same time you have the whole like Harry desperate to get his knowledge back. The whole original Council of Wales won't accept him because he's an idiot now. It's because it's like, oh, we're a group of intellectuals challenging each other with our intellect. But the fact is that he's an idiot, like kind of breaks the foundation of this. So he's no longer part of it. And it's like, we're dealing with a super villain here, but you're so caught up in your own BS that you're not willing to help with that. So they get a new, Council of Wales who kind of put things in a different perspective for, Harry. Cause it's like, they kind of basically made him more empathetic because he's always had to rely on his knowledge. He's kind of an asshole to people. He's kind of sarcastic. He's kind of mean. He gets very angry. It's kind of interesting because it's like, it seems like your smarts kind of did more harm than good. I mean, at least for you personally. I mean, it did great things for everyone else because your smarts can help people, but it's like, it kind of messed you up. I guess it's that situation of like, that's kind of always that kind of is kind of the thing, like when people who are super smart makes them very like socially awkward and stuff like that, not very good at being empathetic because they're very like for him he's always had to rely on his mind. And I guess like I mean this could also potentially help his relationship with Jesse. I mean obviously they've always had a rocky relationship. Obviously where they stand now they're good, but this could probably help him even more because it's something Cisco kind of points out. I was like, oh, you're a lot more empathetic now. I even love Cisco kind of flinching a little bit. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, oh no, I thought you were gonna throw that because the way he was swinging it almost looked like he was. But I was like, wait, oh, why'd you do it like that? Did you change? I was like, oh, you weren't going to swing it. Okay. Nevertheless. There's also that bit when he kissed the trash can and it's still making all that sound of Cisco just staring. Part of me wonders, was that kind of like something kind of left in, kind of a blooper / outtake that was left in because it kept going and just Cisco was just sitting there looking like off screen. So it made me go, is that kind of a blooper that they were like, no, it's too good. Keep it in there. That's funny. I don't know. I thought that's kind of nice. But that whole empathetic situation, kind of looking at things from DeVoe's point of view, made him realize, like, oh, what's the most important thing to him beforehand? The reason why he won't act now, and that thing is Marlies. Which is interesting, that even without I guess Marlies took the chair, but it's not like he needs it anymore. So I guess even as smart as he is, like, because the thing is, it's like, oh, we haven't seen DeVoe active in a while. And it's like, yeah. So Marlies actually leaving actually did affect him. Whatever part of his heart is still there, because she's the reason he started all of this. Because she's been his muse, she's been his inspiration, she's the thing that kept him going. And he probably won't realize it, but I guess it's that little small thing of like, at first he's so smart, he's thinking like, oh, it won't matter, it won't affect me. But now, little by little, like as time is going on, it's started affecting him, but maybe he doesn't realize it. Maybe he just kind of like, because it's like, you've had the opportunity, but why haven't you struck? I mean, to be fair, he always kept being like, oh, I'm so smart. Yeah, he kept Marlies around anyway. It's like, oh, she's the one that handles all like the mechanics. But it's like, being as smart as you are, you wouldn't have to worry about that, would you? Not unless it's just because subconsciously he kept her around for a reason. He now doesn't like know why he did it, but like it's because that little bit of humanity still in him is there. So the team is going to be tracking down Marlies. That's it. Like I said, I figure she's going to be the key to kind of coming together with this whole situation. So ultimately, we kind of have to wait and see what happens with that. I'm curious to see what she's actually up to. Is she devising a way to get rid of him too? I mean, she might be the what means that they need because they got the little concussion thing from Amunet. Which is going to be interesting. I mean, the satellites are meant to be put up in 5 different areas, but they're all in. I mean, he hasn't launched them into space yet. I mean, has he? I mean, they don't know how to find him yet. So, because it's supposed to be kind of like a big concussion. It's like a one-off, but would that even work in space? Oh yeah, interesting enough, didn't even think that's never come up before. I was curious, like, Cisco's breach can't reach space. That's kind of interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'd assume it has to be Marley. She has to design something like a cannon or something for it to kind of explode. Cause I guess like I said, I guess my explanation is like, because they don't know if they'll be able to get DeVoe's devices destroyed before he gets them in space, or maybe they already are in space. Like, I mean, he got the materials and stuff, but maybe they're already kind of set up in space, especially after all this time. I don't know. So that's definitely going to be interesting to kind of see how they get that in space. And also about the whole Caitlyn situation, about her getting Frost back. And obviously she says she's going to, thanks to Joe, she kind of looks at things from a different perspective. And now she knows the way to get Frost back won't be from science. It'll be kind of like something within her that will kind of finally push her in that direction. Another interesting thing that came up this episode was Barry's reluctance to let like Iris writing her like article explaining everything about DeVoe, and part of me was kind of behind that. I kind of understand. I didn't really understand 100% Barry's thought process behind it. I was like, oh yeah, just because it's like, I thought his main concern was like, oh yeah, like, because you don't want people thinking Iris is crazy. But to be fair, it's Central City. Like, there's no such thing as crazy. Once again, it's like the impossible became possible in Central City when it comes to metas. So it's not like anything's impossible. And especially because Iris gathered so much data on DeVoe that she could probably prove everything is like this, and all these little things probably coming together. So I was like wondering, I thought that was Barry's main reason, because he wouldn't want like Iris to suffer ramifications from it. But it's like, no, because he didn't know, like, well, if people know this, like, what would they do? I guess it's kind of like a cynical side of Barry's, like, will they even do the right thing? It took seeing Amunet like non-selfishly. Yes, she had her selfish reasons for being like, okay, like, this will affect me, so I will help out. But nonetheless, she kind of did a non-selfish thing, giving them the weapon they needed, and at the very least. So it kind of made Barry go, okay, at the very least, this means that I should trust in the people of Central City. Because it's so interesting, because I just kind of put an interesting perspective of like, the city has put so much faith in the Flash, it's time for the Flash to do that. Which is kind of interesting, because like, you know, Oliver's had his moment, which is kind of interesting too, because I always go back to it. Oliver had his moment in season 4, where he kind of had it in season 2 as well, because him and Roy led that group against Slade's siege on Central City, plus the city backing up Green Arrow when he fights Damien Dark, which is all kind of ironic now, in a very messed up form of irony, in the sense that basically the city was basically putting him on trial last week, or in the previous episode. So it's just kind of interesting to see where he is now, which is interesting because Barry was in that same situation. Now it's kind of him doing the opposite, because it's like, well, he was on trial by the city, but now it's like, oh, he has to turn to the city for help. And I don't know, it's just funny when you break it down like that. So that basically Barry wants to believe in the city and that they'll do the right thing when the time comes. So interestingly enough, they do, which is kind of neat, because it also brought up something too. It's like, right, they never let the city know exactly what they're up to. They usually kind of keep their whole business low key, which is like, why do you do that? I mean, to be fair, like, it's kind of like the whole, because it's something I didn't even think about, because it's like, yeah, because even Kara writes stories about Supergirl and stuff like that sometimes, so she gets help from Jimmy and stuff like that in the past. But more so, like, it definitely happens with Clark and Lois, like, about them writing stories about Superman and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting, kind of getting what you're up to out there to kind of warn you. I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And it helps out in the long run, because people are like, oh, we're helping, like, the people of the city are your greatest resource. But people are like, no, I've seen this DeVoe guy like a few days ago. It's like, what? He's here, he's there. And it's like, DeVoe can't hide. He might have his pocket dimension, but the moment he starts popping up around, everyone, including the authorities, just people in the city, know what he's up to, are going to be after him. So it won't be as easy to move around, because it's going to attract a lot of attention. Before now, he was able to kind of do whatever he wanted to. I mean, the sad thing is that still puts him in a position, because especially where the mindset he's in right now, he's going to kill people who stand in his way. So if people kind of try to stop him getting in the way, he killed them, so like I said, overall, very good episode. I'm interested to see, where all this kind of goes forward in the next episode, especially with the whole situation with Marlies. I'm also interested, will Harry ever go back to being smart like he was before? They never referenced it, but let's not forget, HR was a part of the team, and he wasn't really smart. He kind of laid the foundation for a lot of, like, the ideas and stuff, but still. I mean, just because, HR had a different perspective he had his situation he came from, and it gave him a different perspective. And I'm curious to see, will that kind of happen for Harry going forward? Would he kind of have a different perspective, or will it be a situation of like eventually he'll get his intelligence back and then kind of be an asshole? But maybe it's going to be one of those things of like he kind of grows from this where he doesn't rely on his intelligence all the way through, that he learns to kind of balance it out. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting seeing what happens. I mean, because that whole situation kind of fits DeVoe too. Like, DeVoe became so obsessed with his own intelligence, and it ultimately made him into who he is. But Harry wasn't willing to really see what he was willing to turn himself into in order to stop the bad guy, So it's just kind of interesting theme they've got going on with Harry's story in this season. So, like I said, we'll just have to wait to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legion, a great episode. I really like the premise behind this entire episode. I saw all the different Davids. I was like, what is this up with this? It's like, okay, so we're seeing the different realities. And I really like that basically one of the Davids in the timelines kind of explains it. He's like, oh, but that basically these branches have branches, and those branches have branches because every choice kind of creates an alternate reality of like the way life could have been. And it's very interesting to look at the different lives David could have had. There was the one timeline where he was homeless. That was kind of interesting because there's that moment he walks by and he sees Sid in like a car. She's being driven around. And immediately my brain goes, right, it wasn't until after I've sat there and thought about the episode for a little bit, I'm like, right, because Sid was going to be released. The only reason why things played out the way they did is because David kissed her. They switched bodies, led to the whole, because Melanie came to get David, but ended up getting Sid instead. So that's how things kind of played out like that. So maybe they would have never actually known about David, because when they switched bodies, that's when David kind of lost control. So he probably just stayed in Clockwork until it was time to release him. I don't know. It's hard to say because the fact of the matter is in that timeline, he's still kind of a little all over the place. So not unless that's just a timeline where he never actually went to Clockwork. It didn't seem like in that particular time period, that timeline, he had Amy. That's where my mind went, which would explain why like Sid was kind of being driven like that, because like her life would have played out differently herself. I mean, it's interesting too because at the very end of it all, like obviously you see, like, because I'm curious, because David's just kind of going a little crazy because I guess in this world, obviously he doesn't know what he is. I mean, he didn't have anyone to help guide him, so he kind of just stayed crazy, which is also, I don't know if that was necessarily Farouk in that particular sense, but it's most likely like just him being crazy just from all the stuff going around his head and just eventually driving him crazy. Maybe even combined with that and Farouk. But in that timeline when he's older, because there's a whole vaporizing people, almost like an atomic bomb thing he's done. Like, he does it twice in the episode in different timelines, but it's like, wasn't that always Farouk's thing? Because he does it in season 1, but that's not actually David's power, because he has a dollar or something. Because every time like Oliver did something earlier this season, like he would kind of turn people to dust. Like, so the whole like blowing people, I don't know, maybe that's a combination of Farouk and David, and maybe it manifested itself in a different form with Oliver. I don't know. Maybe they just felt like maybe just kind of the fun of things, like, oh, do I turn you to dust or do I leave you just to a shadow? I mean, I guess it's similar to the same thing, but I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. What's kind of sad is in that timeline, Division 3 comes to get him because probably like word got out about him. I wonder, is it because they know Farouk is in him? Because I guess in that timeline, it's kind of like, well, everything's done. I mean, David's dead, sure, but hey, Farouk's dead too. It's kind of, well, to be fair, I was also thinking about it too, because we see, Carrie there and she's young, but I was like, right, as long as she's in the other Carrie, like she doesn't age, which also begs the question because this is a much older David too, so makes you wonder what the whole Carrie situation is like. I mean, that's probably something we'll never get an answer to, but she walks up and slices him in half. It's like, well, which is interesting because for one, that means even in that timeline, Summerland still became a part of Division 3, which is kind of an interesting thing to kind of note. But obviously you don't get too much in that timeline except for like Sid and her popping up in that timeline. Then there's another timeline where you have David who's got a mustache, and I guess that's just him medicated. I guess maybe that's supposed to be him after Clockworks. I mean, I think because the whole point is all that's him never going to Clockworks. So, or maybe he did in some timelines, but I feel like him going to Clockworks is exactly like, it's one thing that happened in his timeline that led him to be where he is. So obviously, I guess that's a timeline where just Amy took care of him and he stayed medicated and stuff like that. which even that had a sad ending to it because of the whole Farouk thing kind of popping up, which once again is such interesting, I guess, because Farouk's trying to scare him, because, you know, it's like, because Farouk once again stopped doing the whole monster form thing. That was kind of part of the theatrics, just like the whole Lenny situation. It just meant to kind of terrify him, make him go a little crazy. But yeah, David kept seeing it and led to cops shooting him. But once again, he vaporized all of them. In that timeline, Amy still lived, though, so... Then there's the old man timeline. It still didn't click in my head which timeline that's supposed to be. Is that, because I was like, is that supposed to be a timeline where him and Philly stayed together and they were just a couple? Is that it? Because there's also the timeline where, or not unless that's supposed to be the timeline where he's married. I would assume it probably have to be that one where he's married and has kids. And I do love that they do cut in scenes from season 1 to kind of give you, they try to give you a better perspective on when exactly this timeline is. Like, it's obviously when, like, Amy's like, oh yeah, why can't you just have that good life, natural life, a home and a family like everyone else? And obviously this timeline is that timeline in particular where he has a family is an offshoot of that, like he made a different choice or whatever, you know? And I guess that also means, and just because, I mean, it kind of ends with it in the episode. Obviously I'll talk about the others, but it ends with Clockwork being the reason why he went to Clockworks is because he tried to kill himself. So at least among some of the timelines, at least in what's been presented, that was the only timeline where he attempted to kill himself. And it seems like that's probably like a huge focal point in all of his stories. Like if he had never done that, he wouldn't be where he is right now. The series wouldn't be on the timeline that it's in, which is so fascinating. I mean, because obviously like the X-Men universe as a whole, it's kind of messed with the whole timeline thing, hence the whole Days of Future Past situation, but it's just kind of interesting seeing it kind of implement in the show. I don't know whether it'll actually have an effect or not. It's just, I guess it's just kind of being like, like, because in all honesty, it's hard to say whether his life was better or worse in the current timeline. I mean, there's at least 2 timelines where he dies. One situation where he dies alone to a person who is his friend and ally in another timeline. Just another one just because of just circumstance, you know, so... And then there's the other one where he used his psychic abilities to get to where he is, kind of being a billionaire and stuff, like being super rich and stuff like that. Even his boss, Laura, is actually working for him. Interestingly enough, the actor who plays Ryan from Castle was at that meeting. I was like, oh, it's you. I was like, that's so cool. So that was just kind of something. I guess, like I said, it didn't click in my head to think about it because like, oh, so what does it all tie? Also that, like, you know, timeline where he's just rich. Oh, I guess that's something else entirely. It's like, no, it's got to be connected to the corporate timeline. And it is. I thought that was kind of neat. He's kind of an asshole in that timeline. He keeps the lady that he used to work for, who used to be his boss. Now she works for him. And he's like, it's kind of interesting because in that timeline, he's got a god complex. He even hurts Amy because she wants stuff from him. It's like, oh, you're kind of an asshole in this timeline. And it seems like the reason that is because I'm assuming, I mean, at least what it shows, kind of seeing a reflection. You see him standing there and it's Farouk standing there. So I guess Farouk has complete control over his body. I mean, because the whole conversation of like, oh yeah, like almost like he's God's gift essentially, because it's talking about the fact is that there's in the past, they tried to build towers, you know, to touch the heavens, and to punish them, God created foreign languages so that basically no one could understand everyone, that there's miscommunication. And he's like, me, I'm that beacon. I understand what's in the heart of all men, what's in their mind and their heart. So I'm the ultimate, like, connecting point, essentially. Like I said, very big-headed, very, like, which kind of fits along with Farouk kind of thinking he's God, which I'm curious, like, because it seems like, I don't know, maybe Farouk just kind of started enjoying that life. I mean, because he talks about being rich, because it's like, if you're not powerful, no one's going to listen to you. So it seems like that's what that timeline was just hinting at, just like Farouk has control over his body. So like I said, in the grand scheme of things, it's like, is this timeline worse or better? I think that's kind of the message you're trying to get across. I mean, at the very least, the message is just kind of like, look at the different routes David's life could have taken. And almost at every corner, it's like, your life sucked on almost every opportunity it could. Just because of the nature of what he is. Like, if he had never attempted to kill himself and ended up in Clockworks, he would have never found out about what he is. He would have never met Sid. He would have never met Melanie, he never went to Summerland, they wouldn't be where they are right now. To be fair, that would also mean Oliver probably wouldn't be up. Farouk wouldn't be in Oliver's body. So it's hard to say, like, I mean, because we never got to get like the huge branch off because, I mean, to be fair, that'd probably be too much to kind of like all the different paths. So it just focuses on some of the stuff that David's life, the different choices he made that kind of led him. Because it seemed like in one of his timelines, he's a junkie. I guess that's because it's like, because there was like one thing where Amy was just kind of like, oh, make sure you only take one pill. And I guess like that's a timeline where he like takes more than one. He's a little crazy, but he's just taking a whole bunch of pills. Or maybe it's not, he's not 100% crazy. He's just a little junkied out because he is taking pills all the time to compensate and he just got addicted is maybe what that's supposed to represent. So I guess it could also be seen as kind of like, I mean, maybe in David's mind, this timeline might suck a little bit more because it's like, well, Amy's not alive in this. To be fair, we don't know about her in every other timeline. Like I said, in my head, I kept thinking the old couple. Because at one point I was like, is that supposed to be Amy taking care of him as he's much older? Or is that supposed to be the timeline where he's married and has kids? Like, is that, I would assume, because I feel like we never really cut to any other, like, to me, that's the only one that seems like it fits that timeline. It's not like we ever got a good picture of like what happens when Farouk does have control over his body. I guess it's just kind of like the world's in the palm of his hands. He can kind of do whatever he wants, kind of being a quote unquote god. I mean, we see him use a little bit of his telepathy and like does something to mess with Amy to start making her nose bleed. But it's like beyond that, it's like, does he ever really use any of his other abilities? His more offensive stuff is like, well, it was kind of more like a self-defense. Because it was interesting because in that timeline when he's homeless and older, he was like, oh, did he send you after me? So I was like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, has Division 3 been hunting him before then? Or is that, because I was thinking, like, is that supposed to mean like reference Farouk or something like that? So, but I was wondering, like, would David kind of prefer those other timelines? Because at least in some of them, Amy's alive and well, you know? So, like I said, my biggest question is, will that turn into something in the future? Will those alternate timelines play any role in the future? I mean, to be fair, it kind of plays with the future itself too, because that's what this whole season's kind of about too. Is like kind of about the future. Like he knows the future because he talked to future Sid. So that itself kind of begs the question, like, well, this is the current timeline we're rolling with. This is the multiverse timeline we're dealing with. So it's like, what divisions will this timeline bring, you know? Because we've seen one potential path, and I kind of feel like no matter what, we're still going down that path. The one that the future Sid came from, that timeline, I feel like that's still a thing, potentially. I don't know, maybe enough has already changed that we've kind of deviated from that, but still. Because now that I think about it, like, what's interesting too is like, in none of those timelines did things kind of end up the way they did, interestingly enough. Like, we saw a little bit of Sid's world, like the timeline when he's homeless and older, the world wasn't like that, because that's him much older, and that had to be like not that far into the future. So, and obviously it's not like that in a timeline where he's rich, so whatever situation it was, I guess Farouk kind of helped deal with. Maybe he kind of brought the world together subsequently. Obviously, he's kind of ruling it kind of almost like a dictatorship, but maybe that iron fist rule of his kind of led to things kind of being okay. And in the other timeline, because Farouk stayed inside of David's head and he never... It's really hard to say exactly how everything can play out because there's so many different possibilities, you know? I just always get trippy about that. I really like I said, this is a great episode just because of like what the storyline is, just showing those alternate timelines like that. I think that's such a neat thing to do, and I'm very interested to see, you know, what goes down in the next episode. You know, whether, because we'll be picking up, you know, where this current timeline left off with the whole Lenny and Amy situation. So it's also interesting too because Farouk, there was that line they repeat of Farouk's where it's like, "You're the one that makes something real." So, I mean, I guess it's kind of like you're the one that kind of shapes your own reality and stuff like that, obviously. But I guess that's even more prevalent in the situation where you get to see where the other paths his life took because of the different ways he shaped it. Which also makes me, I mean, with their abilities and stuff like that, it does seem like they could shape reality, essentially, being as powerful as they are. So it's like, I mean, the fact is Farouk did that, but like, could David undo it? Something I didn't even think about. I mean, if he got the right equipment and stuff like, I mean, to be fair, he probably would need Amy's DNA for that to happen. And even then, it's like, well, what was Amy even exist anymore? Like, because there's no remnants of her body because her body's been turned into Lenny, so probably all her DNA and everything about her is Lenny. And the only reason why this was able to happen is because they had Lenny's other body. So, but we did see Lenny wake up from that like walking in the desert. Not unless that was like after, because I could have sworn she rose up from the ground. But was she dirty? Like, did she look sandy or whatever when she came? I guess that no. I mean that's it. But it's just kind of like, I guess when I'm sitting here thinking about it, I guess there was part of me was thinking like, well, maybe no. It's nothing. It's kind of a waste of time. I was just kind of rambling about something, and I just kind of figured it all out in my mind. I was all like, never mind. So. Like I said, I don't think there's any way reversing it, even if he had the right situation, because there's probably nothing of Amy to kind of pull from. There's no dead body or anything like that, because Amy's body's there is just shifted. So, like I said, enough of my rambling. I'm just very interested to see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good